Dear friends, the topic of presentation is Management of Marine Fisheries in India. Let's first see the objectives. The first objective is to explain fisheries management plans. Second is to understand various legislations for fisheries management in India. And third one is to know the various options for fisheries management in India. Fisheries Management Plan, FMP, is all about determining a detailed plan of what is required to achieve the policy objectives for that fishery resource. Single species management practices prevalent in temperate waters will not be suitable to multi-species, multi-gear systems of tropical waters such as in India. Here, the goal of management should be to promote sustainable fishing practices that do not decrease the stock levels, ensure livelihood security, resource sustainability, economic efficiency, and ecosystem integrity. Besides, the fish stocks live in a highly variable and complex ecosystem affected by the human intervention, as well as the vagaries of nature resulting in environmental variations. Recently, many reports of climate change induced variations in fish abundance and distribution patterns have been widely noticed in many fisheries of the world, including India. Therefore, this uncertainty factor also has to be incorporated in the management strategies. Fishery resources must be managed to harvest stocks at sustainable levels for ensuring livelihood security for the benefit of the present and future generations. Hence, management of fisheries is not managing the fish stocks alone, but also has to take into account all the stakeholders who are directly or indirectly involved, such as the fisherfolk, traders, fish processing sector, and consumers. Thus, the management measures should involve action taken for improvement of addition to infrastructure, performance of fishing operations, reduction of wastage, that is, bycatch, discards, etc., improvements in quality or value of fish caught, and income from fisheries, protection of important coastal habitats such as mangroves and estuaries, and resource enhancement programs such as sea ranching, artificial reefs, etc., and efficient fish storage, distribution, and marketing systems to ensure steady prices for the fishes caught and minimize wastage of valuable protein food. To ensure that the management plan is to put into operation and function efficiently includes responsibilities such as collecting and analyzing the biological and fishery data necessary for assessment, monitoring, control and surveillance, adoption and promotion of appropriate, effective laws and regulations necessary to achieve objectives, ensuring that fisheries comply with them to achieve the objectives. Looking into the fishery-related policies, recognizing the importance of fisheries in the coastal ecosystems and national economy, several regulations and notifications have been promulgated by the central and state governments. We can have a glance of Indian Ports Act in 1963 onwards, Environmental Protection Act of 1986, and Coastal Aquaculture Authority Act of 2005, etc., etc. Speaking the technical controls in marine fisheries management, in order to maintain fish stocks at a target level, the management used is that of controlling fishing mortality, that is, the amount and age of fish removed, and this is achieved through various technical measures such as restrictions or constraints that regulate the efficiency of fishing, mainly closed seasons, closed areas, gear restrictions such as type of gear, mesh size, etc. Regarding input controls, the effort put into fishery is taken into account. The effort can be measured in many ways. Example, number of vessels combined with the size, horsepower, number of crew, number of fishing lines or gear, number of fishers combined with the gear they are using, or number of days fished or other time measure, which includes limiting access to fisheries, example through licenses, the size and power of boats, craft OAL, engine horsepower, etc. The amount of time, days per hour, a boat can fish each month, size of the nets used. It's vital that this type of control is being used. If it is used, the increase in the technological ability of the gears and fishes is taken into account. As this increases, so does the effort and efficiency of the fishery. Regarding output controls, this is the direct regulation of the catch taken from the fishery. Example, forms of quota management. This is a more total control of the primary factor, the catch. But it can be both expensive and complex to enforce. Additional controls on the catch can also be made, such as the size of the fish or the maturity stage of the fish, juvenile, adult, spawner, etc. Similarly, total allowable catch, TAC, for a fishery, size limits for capture and marketing, closed areas for fishing, closed seasons for fishing. There are options for sustainable development of marine fisheries in India. Let us see. The first one is a shift from the open access to user rights. As an input control measure, policy measures that abandons the present open access system to resource allocations and establishment of user rights is likely to be most effective for resource management and protection of critical fish habitats in an aquatic environment. If such measures are introduced, they will inter alia provide greater incentives to reduce excess fishing capacity or pressure, which has been one of the major factors responsible for overfishing and unsustainable development. In addition, the establishment of user rights is particularly important in protecting the interest of artisanal fishers from unequal competition with industrial vessels. The policy should aim to ensure socio-economic security for the artisanal fishermen whose livelihood depends solely on this avocation. Thus, the measure suggests the mandatory registration and licensing of all motorized and mechanized boats, review of registration and licensing every 5 years, upward revision of the registration, licensing fees and berthing charges discourage to new entrants. Another option is reduction of fishing effort. The fishery regulation through effort reduction that is in vogue in different maritime states is chiefly aimed at the trawl fishery. In recent years, there has been significant increase of the motorized sector, especially the ring seine fishery and the mini trawl fishery. This trend is most evident among the Kerala coast, causing concern for sustenance of some of the exploited stocks. The increase in the time spent for fishing in the mechanized sector by undertaking multi-day voyage and use of the sophisticated electronic devices for fish finding and the communications have resulted in increased fishing efficiency. Action points suggest that fixing and capping the size and power of the boats in each sector by imposing upper limits for the length and horsepower, especially the large ring seiners operating in Kerala. Restriction of multi-day fishing by fixing upper limit for absence from the shore in all the states, discouraging further entry to fishery through refusal of licensings to new boats. Another strategy is the closed season or closed area, or better to say marine protected areas, MPAs, recognizing the necessity for ensuring sustainable yields from the exploited stocks. Certain maritime states have enacted fishery regulation acts enabling effort reduction, rebuilding of the stocks and ecosystem rejuvenation by closure of fishery for a specified period of time. Restriction of the number of days for fishing during monsoon is the most common method followed in India. Objectives being the protection of the spawning stocks from the capture by mechanized fishing vessels and also allowing the capture replenishment of the fish stocks. Presently, there is a consensus among the fishermen that the intensive exploitation of the coastal waters does adversely affect the ecosystem, resulting in low productivity from different trophic levels. This has led to the acceptance of a uniform ban on the mechanized crafts, mainly trawl, in the monsoon months along the entire Indian coastal belts. Designating areas of fish spawning and feeding marine protected areas, MPAs, is another strategy. The idea behind reserves is that if the fishes are protected from fishing, they live longer, grow larger, and produce an exponentially increasing number of eggs. It is observed that adult fishes tend to remain in the protected areas, while their larvae helps replenish adjacent fisheries. The suggested measures: mandatory closed fishing season from 15th June to 31st July in the West Coast, from 15th April to 30th May for the East Coast. Only non-motorized and low horsepowered motorized, that is up to 10 HP, OBM or IBM vessels are to be allowed to operate during the closed season. Mesh size regulations and curbs on the destruction of fish juveniles is another strategy. The fine measures of gears like trawl bags and bag nets cause large-scale destruction of juveniles of many important commercial fishes. The chord and mesh size (CEMS) of the trawls prevalent in India is uniformly very small, 10 to 15 millimeter, stretched knot to knot, while the recommended minimum stretched mesh size is 35 mm. It may be recommended that the chord and mesh size of 35 mm may be enforced in Indian waters to ensure sustainable exploitation of the fish and shrimp stocks. As regards to lobster resource, Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute (CMFRI) has recommended the minimum legal weight (MLW) for capture of 4 species of lobsters to ensure sustainable exploitation of the resource. The fishing for shrimp seed along the coastal waters for the East Coast is yet another example of the destruction of valuable ichthyoplankton. For every shrimp seed collected, hundreds of other larvae and juveniles are commercially important species of finfishes and shellfishes are destroyed. Diversification of vessels and targeting specific resources is another option. To ease out fishing pressure in the inshore waters, the existing vessels may be suitably upgraded or modified as multi-purpose or combination vessels to harvest the undertapped resources like tunas, billfishes, pelagic sharks and oceanic squids available in the oceanic and deeper waters. Participatory management is an innovative approach to decentralize management authority and make fishermen as resource managers. Here, the management of fisheries is made more effective by active involvement of all principal stakeholders in the decision making and implementation of the resource management programs. Ecosystem-based fisheries management (EBFM) is another option. Traditionally, fish population dynamics have been studied as a single species, for example as mackerel, shrimp or sardine, and almost always in isolation from the system in which they exist. However, there is a growing awareness that these kinds of assessments and management interventions will be unrealistic, which gave rise to the concept of EBFM, fishing activities. With an ecosystem approach to fisheries management, EBFM is a geographically specified fisheries management that takes account of the knowledge and uncertainties about and among biotic, abiotic, and human components of the ecosystems and strives to balance diverse societal objectives. In India, EBFM is being attempted by CMFRI by developing models for the Karnataka coast of Southwest India, Gulf of Mannar, and northwest coast of India. Code of Conduct of Responsible Fisheries (CCRF), which was evolved by FAO, aimed at long-term sustainable measures for optimal exploitation of the fishery resources. It is voluntary in nature and defines the general principle that right to fish carries with it the obligation to do so in a responsible manner. The code calls for the effective legal and administrative framework for the refusal, withdrawal or suspension of the authorization to fish in the event of non-compliance with the conservation and management measures. Strengthening management information system, the basic requirement for knowledge-based fisheries management is the availability of reliable and adequate data on the resources and their dynamics including economics of fishing. For this, an effective data acquisition mechanism is needed. For this, linked to the schemes for registration of crafts and availability of subsidies etc. by the fishermen, compulsory availability of fishing logbooks to identified national research institutes like CMFRI can be enforced. Fisheries development is closely related with the involvement of the ability of the fishermen or fish farmers' understanding and adoption of the sustainable fishing practices and innovative mariculture technologies. The extension system in the marine fisheries in India is conspicuous by the absence of its formal institutionalization, as in the case of agriculture sector, where the transfer of technology approach, a three-tier system comprising of the technology generation, frontline extension and grassroots level extension, which is followed. In this approach, the technology generation and frontline extension activities come under the mandate of ICR institutes as well as state agriculture universities, while grassroots level extension is carried out by state departments, the Krishi Vigyan Kendras, Brackish Water Fish Farmers Development Agencies BFFDA, the Institution Village Linkage Program IVLP, and the Agriculture Technology Information Centers ethics of ICAR are playing an important role in the extension programs of the marine fisheries sector. Hence, there is a great need to develop a research extension system oriented towards responsible and sustainable fisheries in the country. Further scope for useful extension exists in creating awareness among the fishermen of adverse consequences of destruction of fish eggs and juveniles and discarding fish at sea, conservation of endangered species and fragile marine ecosystems, improvement of the hygiene and sanitation in landing or processing centers, production of value-added products, ornamental fish culture and mariculture activities. If I conclude the session, we discussed about management of marine fisheries. We learned the objectives, various options of fisheries management, etc. I hope you all understood well about the topic. If you have any further queries, kindly visit the Manage website or the reading material provided to you. Thank you so much for the very patient listening.